Hello and welcome back to Chatting with Chaz. I'm so glad you're here with us today. I have a surprise. We changed up our set. We're no longer in a sofa. We have a couple chairs. I think that's going to be fantastic. But let me reintroduce myself. My name is Chaz. I'm the creative director and founder of Linen and Flax Co. And I'm also your host today. Today is a really special day because I have my dear friend Catherine Hickem with us. She's been a friend of mine for over 22 years, maybe even longer. But I think she's going to be a friend of yours. I've invited her to speak at our live event this year. She was also with us last year. And today we're going to talk a lot about parenting. Parenting from ages being born, infancy, to adult children. And Catherine has been just incredible in my life to help me be intentional about my parenting, have a parenting. You've basically been a leader in my life to do parenting with no regrets and to build and foster a healthy relationship, respectful relationship with all of my kids. So we're going to talk about that. But first, let me introduce her. She is, like I said, a boss. She is the CEO of the Dash Group. The Dash Group is a company that specializes in leadership, and she's an incredible leader. She leads corporations. She's also has a background in psychotherapy. Did I say that right, Catherine?
You did.
And and she's a book author, and she's written this book, Regret-Free Parenting, which I've loved and really changed the way I parent. So without any more hesitation, let's talk to Catherine. Catherine, tell my friends a little bit about yourself in your words.
Okay. Probably the best way to describe me is someone who early on figured out that I really wanted to help people. And as time went by, it became really clear that that's when I really felt I was really comfortable in my own skin, being able to, and I was a good listener. I mean, I grew up being a really great listener.
You are a great listener.
And so I thought, all right, what can I do with that? And so I went to school, became a psychotherapist, and I started my career working with children. And that was how I really began to learn what it meant to be a good parent, because I had a chance to see parents in pain and struggling. And then I wanted to be a parent. It took me 7 years to get there. So I had an infertility journey along the way. And then I finally got a chance to be a mom. And my son is adopted. And then I got pregnant 5 months after he was born.
Surprise.
So now I have two under 14 months. So it was baptism by fire, right? And so I had the chance to really jump in and figure out, what is this all about? And so my children are incredibly different. And so it really stretched me. And so it gave me just a real heart and passion to help other people who had a lot of the same questions that I had.
Yes.
And so that unfolded for many, many years. And so it still unfolds. I mean, all these years later, my son is 39, so that should tell you how many years I have really been passionate about this. And so I love working with parents, and I love being able to address the issue, especially around now parents of adult children, because no one really talks about that.
Yes.
It's a hard topic, and it's a really broad-based topic. So
yeah, and you almost think that once your kids hit 18 or they go to college, like, oh, empty nest, you're home free, but it's really just another level of parenting.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to talk more about that.
Yeah, it's a completely different level, and it's actually in some ways harder.
Yes, I agree.
And it's like no one talks about it.
No one talks about it.
So therefore, like, we kind of stay over in our little corners trying to figure it out as if we're the only ones going through it. And the truth is, everybody faces incredible challenges doing it.
Yes.
But if we really want to do it right and maintain healthy relationships, we're going to have to work at it like we did when they were little. It's just very different.
So when they're little, that's how we met.
Yeah.
We ended up, we went to the same church, and you had a ministry, Intentional Motherhood. Okay. And my kids were very young. I think I had 3 under 4 years old, and I was trying to do the best I could do. And I just really wanted to be an intentional mom. I didn't really know what that word meant in parenting, but when I heard you speaking, I kind of fell in love with you. I fangirled. I was like, who is this woman? And I just want to sit underneath her, and I want to learn everything that she has to say. And so I started going to your, I think it was a class initially.
Right, it was.
And then it became a whole speaking engagement. And I think you had me speak a couple times at one of them, just being a young mom and saying how you impacted me, and then sharing about your book, Regret-Free Parenting. So we met 22 years ago, I would say, ish. And I had young kids and I was overwhelmed. And I think a lot of you probably have felt that too. And you're like, what do I do? And 3 young kids. I think the third one just put me over the edge, not because of who he is, but because, you only have 2 hands.
Right.
You have 3 kids. And I was really seeking wisdom and I just wanted to be the best. And I just remembered walking away from your class, from your teaching engagements, of being intentional and it being a constant word in my mind with each child, like you said, being so very different. I feel like a lot of our kids are all different. And I know my 3 specifically I've parented completely different.
Right.
So you really helped me with that, being intentional about how I parent Christian, how I parent Jacqueline, how I parent Riley. Parenting in general, all 3 of them, but specifically tapping into who they are as a person. Tell us a little bit about that. We'll start with the young. There's a lot of listeners that their kids are young. They're in the stroller phase. They're in the car seat phase. They're eating applesauce for lunch. You know what I mean?
Right.
What could they think of? Give them a nugget for this age, this phase.
I started to say when they're little, soak up, get to know them, really, really pay attention to who they are and don't compare. Comparison, Theodore Roosevelt said, comparison is the thief of joy. And when we compare our kids, no one wins.
That's so true.
Everybody loses. And so if we stay really curious, I think curiosity is our friend.
Yes.
And so if we have a chance to really step back and really be curious of when they say something or how they do something, because they'll approach things very differently. Mine were really close together, right? And so I could just see, I had one who was pretty nonverbal. I had another one who was highly verbal. I had one who loved to put things, do puzzles. And I had another one who was far more people connected. And so, just watching how they approach something was so very different. But yet, how they related to each other was really sweet and really special. And I had to, though, not compare.
Yes.
I just had to not compare because they were just going to be who they were in their own way.
Because you really could compare everything from their sleeping. Riley slept all the time and this child doesn't sleep at all, or how they eat. I mean, literally every single thing. And you have to adapt to them instead of trying to run a ship is what I learned.
Yes.
And it was really very child specific in my parenting. And I learned that from you.
Yeah.
You would say things like, Jacqueline needs you. She needs, Riley is a leader but Jacqueline needs you. And then Christian, and you would very specifically kind of see in a short time how I could specifically parent them. And it made me kind of look at them differently too. Like, okay, this is her love language. This is Christian's love language. This is Riley's. And really be intentional from love language to what they considered love and what value, what their value was. Like, going to the park for Christian was a big deal. Riley just wanted to stay home and cuddle. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
That's
so
exactly
he didn't want to
right.
go to the park, but Christian wanted to go play and, be out there and run. And Riley could be playing with cars. And Jacqueline just wanted to play with dolls in her room quietly with me. So they were all so different. And I learned a lot to adapt to them and not them adapting to me.
Right. And, it's interesting because I learned that actually, I had asked the kids to write the foreword to my book. And so I didn't realize how important that was until I read Taylor's part of the foreword. And that's one of the things he said is, you always adapted to where I was. And I didn't even realize I was doing that because even though I knew it, it was like, I think they don't know it until they stop to think about it.
Yes.
And when they stop to really recognize, that's a way of us telling them that we know them.
Yes.
Right? It's letting them know you're changing, you're evolving, I'm keeping up with you.
Yes.
And that's really important.
That is important.
Because that says you're not trying to make them what you want them to be. That means you're following the lead of who they are. And I think that's a gift that we can give them.
Yes.
Regardless of what age they are, starting when they're little. But as they unfold and grow, that becomes even more important.
I think that was very helpful to me that, I was reading books before I met you, and it was like to train up a child, like you had to train him your way. And I just felt like I was frustrated all the time because they were different. They weren't like the kid in the book and they weren't like each other. And I was so frustrated as a parent because I'm like, what am I doing wrong? As soon as I just turned that thinking to how I wanted them to perform for me and just love them for who they are, everything changed. And I feel like that very thing as adult children, they are still very different. they have love languages. It's time for one. It's, partnering with another. It's all so true from every age to really know your children. You would always say that they want to be known. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. You don't have to have them completely adapting to our schedule and just being that authority. Of course you're a parent. Of course your job is to lead them, but it's also to know them.
It's one of the very best gifts that we can give them, because if we don't know them, we can't communicate to them who they are, and they look to us to define them.
Yes.
Right? And so we don't want to define them by limitations. We want to be able to define them by the nuances that make them unique, and where we see their gifting, and we see, what did God have in mind when he created them? And so we have that up close and front row seat to see that unfolding, that we now get a chance to be able to communicate back to who they are, what they're like, where their strengths run. And I think that's one of the gifts that we can give them as parents, because they care about what we think, and they care about what we see. It's important to them. And so another gift that as a parent we get to give them.
Yes. So we met at church, through intentional motherhood. Right. In what way, how does your faith, my faith, I know our faith, has impacted the way a parent as well? Not everybody that's watching us, is raising their kids, the way I'm raising them with my faith, and they might have a different faith. So how has your faith impacted your parental leadership? I mean, you know what I mean? I know everything.
Let me be really clear.
Be very clear.
I wouldn't be here had I not had a faith, because, let me give you a quick story. Okay. So, we'd gone through years of infertility, and I was tired of putting my body through all the things. And so I said to my husband, if I've come to the conclusion that it's more important for me to be a mom than it is for me to give birth. So here's a card of an attorney for us to, quote, maybe go talk to, so we could see if we could adopt a child. And I said, but it's on you, and I'm not going to ever bring it up again. So you pray about it, and if we're supposed to do it, then you make the appointment, and then let me know. That was in March of 84. In June of 84, he comes home one day and he says, by the way, I've made an appointment for us to go talk to the attorney, and so we can see what this is all about. So we go to the attorney, and we're talking, and the attorney says, well, so what do you want in with a baby? It's like this is like a buffet. I get to pick. I mean, what do you mean? And he says, well, just tell me. And so I pray. I say, okay, God, I have no clue. What do you want me to say? And in my head drops this list. Okay. Never thought of it before, but I prayed. This list drops, and here's the list. The list was, I want the baby to come from an older couple. And he said, well, why is that? And I said, because I want them to understand the implications of their decision. There's no giving them back if they make that decision. They need to really have the maturity to make that decision. I said, second thing is, I want the baby to come from a married couple. He said, married couples don't give up their babies. I said, look, you just asked me. This is my list. So I want the baby to come from a married couple. And I said, it would be hard for me to explain a one-night stand. I'm sure I could, but for some reason I'm supposed to tell you that. And he's like, she's crazy. And then the next thing was, I'd like for them to be average intelligence, because adoption is complicated, and want them to be able to understand. So the parents could be, at least average intelligence. I'd like there to be no history of alcohol or drug abuse, and I don't want the mom smoking. And by this time, he's put his pen down, right? He's like, this woman has just lost her mind, right? And the very last thing was, I would really like them to be people of faith. That is something that would be really important. He says, I need you to understand this isn't going to happen. And he said, you're the last couple to walk in. It'll be several years before I reach out to you. And he says, but don't get your expectations high about this. And I said, okay. I said, the great news is, we can leave here. It'll give us time to get our funds together to be able to do this. And at least I can walk out knowing at some point in time I'll be a mom. And so we left, and we were ecstatic because we knew that somewhere in the future we would be a parent. 3 weeks later, we get a call. He says, I think you should sit down. He said, a married couple walked in my office yesterday. He said, they're getting a divorce. He said, they're older. They both are incredibly smart. He said, the mom came from a conservative background, so she's never smoked, drank, or done drugs. And he said, the last thing and only thing that they really requested was that this child go to a couple that shared their faith.
Wow.
And you share their faith. And so I have moved you from the bottom of the list to the top of the list because there's no way this child can't be yours.
Wow. He is so your child, too.
He is so my kid. But you know what, Chaz? God knew I needed that moment in time because he was going to present quite a few challenges to me where I would really doubt my mothering. And then I would be able to look back at that moment in time and go, you didn't make a mistake.
Right.
You did pick me to be his mom. So tell me how I do this.
Yes.
And so for me, my faith has been foundational from before I got him, that I knew that if he gave me the list that was impossible, that he clearly could, quote, help me raise whatever children he chose to give me.
Yes.
And so
I love that.
I totally have been incredibly reliant to this day at the ages that they are now, which are 38 and 39. My first go-to is to ask him what he wants me to know about the situation. And so that's how I've gotten where I've gotten in the midst of my mistakes, in the midst of hard times at moments, and seasons.
In seasons.
I have listened, and I'm so thankful he talks to me.
Well, I think our faith in God, our God, is our partner in parenting.
Yes.
And, it's the most precious gift you're given. And so, I believe he's given us this gift. And so who better to consult as the gift giver himself,
Right.
And so it has been completely foundational for me as well, my faith and how I've raised the kids and wanting to raise them up and train them up in their faith, because as young adults, they will end up finding their own path and their own faith. And now I can hear, Jacqueline saying how important it is when she's in college, that she misses the church that, she goes to here. And whenever she's home, she really wants to be invested in her faith, and she feels conviction still. And it's like she has convictions because she was raised to believe that there's an order, and an order in her faith. And it sets them as God is their compass, more so than me just parenting them and telling them, don't do this, don't do that. It's more, they don't even have to hear that from me. I've just been able to love them because they're following Jesus. They're not following Chaz. And their faith is adapting to his leadership.
Yes.
And I just get the gift to love them.
Right. And, I think part of our opportunity is to be able to impart something to them that they can take long after we're gone.
Yes.
Right. That they can hold on to that. And who knows them better than
rock.
Even we know them.
Yes.
So that's always the comfort too.
And I think, our faith being so important, not only just in parenting, but them seeing us in hard times, in challenges, who we run to, so that when they're adults and they have their own family, they could say, this is what happened. This is what my mom would do. My mom would stop and pray. This is what my mom would say. All right, everybody, we need to ask God for help because this is beyond me. And I hope that they will see these times, even though they were challenging and difficult, and the seasons you talk about, that they will say, and they will kind of glean from it and say, okay, I know what to do. I need to pray. And when they have children of their own, I'm going to pray for them. When their kid's sick in the middle of the night and you can't get a doctor on the phone and their fever is 105, and you're just praying because that's all you've got.
Right.
And then you see, that God heals and touches, and they've seen that happen in our home. And I just hope that's my prayer, that they remember those things and they can rely on the same God and know that they can find the same peace in that as they raise their children, which just blows me away that they will do that one day. I hope. I know. Yes.
Well, and I think, by modeling that for them, right?
Yes.
Because children do what we do, not what we say.
Yes.
Bottom
that
line.
is so true.
Right.
Parenting without words, right?
That's exactly right.
Yes.
They pick up on our behavior, not all the things that we can preach or teach.
I think that's a a really important thing to talk about, how they pick up on your behavior, because
Oh, yeah.
I even know, even just with my wellness journey, you know, when I was as the kids, now they're teenagers. And so they're looking at their bodies and body image stuff. And, you know, when I was just stressed the max, and, you know, during that season, I was eating pizza and Cokes and everything, eating hot dogs with them at midnight in the drive-thru after a football game, and thinking I was a fun mom. But they were adopting bad habits, just in the physical part, not even, so if that was even brought over on my faith, you know, if I just stopped going to church or didn't care, or said, you know, I don't even believe this, which I wouldn't. But anything that you do as a parent, they take on. And I never realized it so much with this health journey. You know, all of my kids were like, well, we kind of did the same thing you did. And now that I've turned it around, they're all doing the same thing that I'm doing now. And it sounds so small,
No,
but
it's
I'm like,
big.
wow, they really are watching everything from what I'm eating to how I'm moving, that I'm a different person. They watch how I navigated, you know, the business and starting a business, and they watch everything. And as adult children, I think the coolest thing is when they say to you, and I have an entrepreneur son that says, I learned this from watching you because you started with nothing. That's the gift of parenting. When they get older and you're like, oh, all those hard things, all those late nights, you know, all those miles you run when your daughter's like calling me in the morning in college and she's on a treadmill and she's not suffering from a hangover. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're just like, yes, they're watching, but oh no, they're also watching if you're not taking care of yourself. So talk about that and how critical it is that they are watching every single thing you do, good or bad, and learning.
This happened when they were teenagers, okay? And so we were at a season in our lives where we were going through a really hard time. God had asked me to leave my practice at that time, and so I wasn't working. There was no income coming in, so things were really, really tight. And so we got down to one car and a family of 4 drivers. One car. And so I knew I just didn't feel led at all to go out and buy a new car. And I said that. I was like, I just can't do that knowing where we are financially.
Right.
So I said to God, so what do you want me to do about that? And he says, well, why don't you ask the kids to ask me to give y'all a car? So I said, okay, kids, we're going to ask God to give us a car. They were like, really? And I was like, yeah. No, they're 16 right now. So get a load of this. They're 16 and 17. So I said, yeah, we're going to ask him to give us a car. And they go, well, how long are we going to give him? I said, well, why don't we try 30 days?
Oh,
and
let's put God on a time frame.
And I said, and they said,
it.
really? I said, yeah. I said, so let's commit that we're just going to thank him every night. Let's just thank God for the car that he's going to give us. And they said, okay. So about 3 days before the 30 days were up, they came and they said, Mom, what happens if God doesn't give us a car? And I was like, well, I guess we'll give him an extension. Because he's God. You know, this is his timetable, not ours.
Yeah.
And they said, are you sure? And it's like, yeah, just keep thanking him. So the next day, we get a call from a family that we knew and asked if their dad could go see him. And so he goes to see them. And so this man, whose name is Chuck, said, you know, I just bought my little lady a new car, and I have this other one sitting out here, and I just think I'm supposed to give it to you.
Wow.
And he said, really? And he said, yeah. And he says, come back tomorrow. He said, I'm going to put new tires on it, have it all checked out, so it'll be good to go. He said, but just come get it. He said, it's yours.
Wow.
So, I mean, the next day, right? Before the deadline,
yes,
he drives up in this car. It is a cute car. It is a car they're not going to be embarrassed to be seen in.
As teenagers, right?
Right. And so it was perfect for them. Perfect.
I love it.
And they walked out, and I said, so what do you think? And they said, oh my gosh, Mom, he heard us. I said, yeah, he did. And he said, he always hears us.
He always
hears
because you
us.
could have prayed that quietly, like been like the mom that's like, oh my gosh, we don't have a car and I'm stressed out. But I love that you brought the kids in. That shows faith, that you believed it, that you believed that he would come through. And I think faith, there's a scripture, you know, that's built by continuing seeing God move. And I think I learned that in your book too. You're a storyteller and you would tell these stories. And I started relying more on my faith, and I did it in a more confident way instead of like, well, I'm just going to pray this because no one would believe I'm praying it. And especially not my kids. And if he doesn't come through, I don't want him to think that God is bad. You know what I mean?
Right. That's a real place.
Yes. That you were brave and you were like, let's rely on him. And if he doesn't, it's just not his timing. And we have done that too. I'm like, guys, we're just going to, and I'm telling you those prayers that I have prayed like that, he has always shown up, and it's always the last minute. It's always, and I think that's just to persevere. So we persevere in our faith, and he tests us a bit, as Scripture says. It's amazing. So last week I was in church, and they were talking about where your treasure is. Actually, even this Sunday seems like it's a 2-part message. Where is your treasure? And as I sat there listening, of course, my faith, but I couldn't help think about it's my kids. That is my treasure. And it's like, and he talked about, it's the things that you're investing in, and you're spending your time and you're making sure, look at your bank account. I'm like, well, it's definitely my kids. Look at my bank account.
Right. That's very humbling.
So where is your treasure?
It always goes back after my faith.
Yes.
It always goes back to my children.
Always, right? I think as women, I think men too, but there's just something about a mom's heart, no matter what age they are, you want to make sure your kids are okay.
You do. And the other thing too, Chaz, I think that's really been helpful for me is that there's something I'm always going to be learning that God wants me to know through them. I learn all kinds of lessons
through them
in my relationship with them, because I often have to just, especially with them being adults, right? I have to constantly turn things over. I don't just give my opinion freely. I wait to be invited to give my opinion, right?
Right.
That doesn't mean I don't have opinions.
Right.
But sometimes it's the question of, do I really believe that you love them more than I love them? Right. And so they help me grow. They help me become an even better person, deeper person. And it's hard. I mean, sometimes it's really hard because they just make decisions that you're like, how did you get there?
Yes.
Or, like, wow, that's really bold,
Right.
But it's a teachable moment for me by being in relationship with them. And God uses it all the time to show me how much he loves me by showing me how he shows up in them and
so
how
true.
he teaches me.
I agree. It's interesting when Jacqueline was home. I feel like all my kids teach me stuff, actually, all 3 of them in different ways. They've come to me at specific times. And I believe sometimes God loves me through them.
Yeah.
But he also speaks to me through them.
Yeah.
And when they speak, they have wisdom. And it's wisdom that's come from a solid relationship that we've built, investing and focusing over this time of their childhood, right? The younger years. And then it develops more in their teen years. And there's even Jacqueline and I, there was like a struggle in her teen years because I really wanted to, like control her because I was protective of her.
Sure.
And, she learned as we navigated through the teen years, I was protective for a reason. Right. And once she discovered that, then she understood. And then our whole relationship changed when she understood it was protection and not me just being a drill sergeant. But she was here over Christmas and we, of course, spent a lot of time together. And we were out to dinner one night and she just started sharing her thoughts and really kind of speaking into my life, whether it was about the business or, all the things. And it was so wise. And she sounded like, not to say, but like a little mini me, how I would talk to her. And it's like they've listened, they understand scripture, they understand their faith and the importance of faith. And I just sat there kind of in awe. I'm like, this is what all that training, loving, leadership, protecting, late nights talking, early mornings talking, phone calls. This is what develops is a relationship where now she is having a dialogue, an adult conversation. And it was so amazing. It was just like, this is worth it. And it was really impactful. I mean, I thought about what she said, and she even was able to articulate what she needed and what's important. And as much as I want to give her all this freedom in college, she's like, no, I want you to call me like every day. And I'm like, oh, and I'm just thinking, I'm giving you space. And she's like, no, I need to know that you're thinking about me,
Right.
It was really amazing to see them as adult children. So that being said, we develop a strong relationship. We understand who they are. We see who they are in the early years. How does it shift in adult parenting? How do we shift as parents?
I sort of say we have to do the adjusting because we're so used to, quote, being in charge, having control, and then it flips.
It flips.
It flips. And we need to do it graciously. We need to do it with respect. We need to do it with recognizing, yes, they're going to make mistakes. And yes, they may do it differently than we would do it. But you know what? That's okay. This is their journey. And hopefully we've allowed them to make mistakes all along the way. So this isn't their first opportunity to fall.
Yes.
Right? Because we want to still be there to help encourage them when they get back up.
Yes.
One of the things I love about Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx,
yes,
is that in her home, she had 2 siblings, and her dad every week would go around and say, "How did you fail this week?" And he would always get them to share a failure because he wanted them not to be frightened to take risks. He wanted them to be free to make mistakes while they were home. So when they got out into the world, they would do really great things because they weren't scared, right?
Right.
And fear drives so much in our lives, unfortunately.
So
and especially in our young adults because they're trying to figure out who they are. Do they fit in? Will someone accept them? Will we still like them? I mean, they're really concerned about what we think about them.
Yes, it's so true.
And so we have to really let them know, you know what? You're never, ever going to lose my love, my presence, my support.
Yes.
I may not understand you. I may not even agree with you, but I will always
that's such
love
a good
you.
point. Yes.
We'll
always love you. Just being that constant. I totally agree that is what they need more than anything is to know you're immovable. Like you're not moving. You are there. You're steady, whether you agree with them or not.
Right.
It's always interesting with my kids is there's been times where I've parented them and I would say, well, I don't believe in drinking. I don't agree with it. I don't think there's any benefit to it. And I would say these things and I would fully know that they're going into college and that would happen. But I would tell them how I felt about it till this day. I don't think it's the best option for you. I don't think, all my reasons, not really about even conviction, more so than just what is it? Give me one good thing it does for you. And so we would disagree about those behaviors if they were going out to a party or something and there was drinking, when they're in college. It's like I just knew I couldn't just drill them all day.
Right.
And I just didn't want to shut down the conversation. And so, but they would know where I was in my position and then they would kind of always come around, whether it was, I'm thinking of drinking, but kind of anything. It was dating, if it was, how they are with their bodies, if it's purity, they would always have lots of questions, but then they'd always come back to it. It's like if you're quiet about it and you're just not like heavy handed about it and that position and you also live it out,
right.
To a degree of, they don't see me drinking. They don't see me getting, hungover,
right.
They're like, and I'm the life of the party. A lot of the times they're like, okay, that's doable. I think you could have a life without that or whatever it might be. I think, it's amazing how if you don't agree, if you do that in a quiet, respectful way, they respect you and they kind of always circle back to it. That's kind of what I've seen.
Well, and it's interesting. They have lived with us.
Yes.
Forever, right?
Yes.
So they know how we think. They know what we feel. They know our convictions. They know what we're strongly opinionated about.
And it's true. Like if they know we're strong about this, that when I'm pretty like loose with other things, like, oh yeah, I'm all about having fun.
Right.
If there's something I'm going to be like strong with or like, I need to pay attention because she's pretty cool. Like she gets us. She knows us because they've watched that develop in our relationship.
Yes.
She knows us. She loves us. She's thinking now as adult children, she's thinking it's for our best interest. She's not trying to be a killjoy.
That's exactly right.
Isn't that true in parenting?
Absolutely. Kids know when we're doing it for control.
Yes.
And they know when we're doing it out of a purity of motive.
Yes.
Right. They have this innate sense of knowing what's driving us.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. And we need to pay attention to that as parents.
Yes.
What am I scared? Is fear driving my ability to be controlling?
Yes.
And oftentimes that's exactly what's behind it, right?
Yes.
We don't want them to get hurt. All these things we don't want them to experience.
Yes.
But fear is not reflective of the peace that he gives us that says you're going to have to release and trust now.
Yes.
Right? So I think when we are able to, quote, honor and respect them and still give them guidelines, but do it again with the most incredible way of loving.
I think that's a topic I'd like to talk about is fear-based parenting, because I know yours truly, I had some fears. And I think my fear was that somebody would, harm my kids because of my past.
Sure.
Someone would, just do something wrong, I'm at a loss of a word right now, but I was super protective. But it was very fear-based. And if Jacqueline went to the movies, I go to the movies and I'm sitting behind her, like a little crazy. And I had to work through that, and I had to work with God and deal with that. And they saw me shift, but I was like holding so tightly. I was that helicopter mom. I wanted to know where they were, Life 360 at all times. Now they're always tracking where I am on Life 360. It's kind of shifted. But it's funny. I have been able to let that go. But what a freedom when you're not fear-based parenting and when you trust God that He really has got them. That changes the way we parent. And I'm like, okay, I can trust God with this when they go to college, and I can trust God when they're in a situation that maybe is, uncomfortable for me. Like He's got them. And like you said earlier, He loves them more than I do. I find that impossible, but I do believe it.
Right.
So how can someone who is struggling with that, speak to the mom who's like, listen, I am holding on for dear life. I am that helicopter mom. I am fear-based parenting, because I know there's a lot of us. I used to host women in my home. We do small group, and a lot of moms talked about that. How do we let go and let God?
I have a good friend whose name is Jamie Winship, and he talks about confession. And he says, confession's not saying I'm sorry. Confession's telling the truth. And so I always start off with telling the truth, which is, God, right now I'm really struggling and I'm really scared. And it's like, I don't want to let go because I don't know that you have them. And this is really scary for me to trust you with them.
Yes.
That's being honest.
Yes.
That's being very real, and God prefers real over good.
Yes.
Right? So, which means I want a real relationship with you. So tell me what's true. And if what's true is I'm scared they're going to make a dumb mistake, or I'm scared they're going to find themselves in a situation they don't know how to get out of, then tell him that. Be honest. Say, and can you show me how to deal with that? And I always say, that's when we need to be still and we need to listen.
Yes.
And see, what are the thoughts that come into our head? What drops into our mind that we haven't thought of before.
Right.
That we know wasn't our thought, And you're
like, that's a good idea.
That's a great idea.
I mean, that's happened before. I'm like, thank you, God. I didn't think of that.
Oh, I mean, that's totally how I had to parent, especially with my son, because he's the one who was a crapshoot. I never knew what was happening with him, ever. And so, but even with my daughter, it's like, I wanted to be the very best version of me, but sometimes it's scary.
Yes.
And I just had to get honest with God. It's like, I'm really scared and I don't know what to do with this. And that doesn't change. No matter how old they get, there's always something that's happening that I have to kind of keep handing it back over and go, okay, let's talk again.
Yes.
And trusting. It's about that whole idea of trusting.
Yes. Trusting them, trusting God, and being okay if they do fail.
Absolutely.
I think that's been a good thing for me as well. It's just kind of like, you guys have got this. This is just cute. And he'll probably kill me for saying this. Maybe I shouldn't even say it. But like Riley's learning to cook, and he is, and I told him last night, we're cooking some things together. And I'm like, listen, nothing could go wrong. Even if the chicken's undercooked, you'll know it immediately, But as I was saying that, I'm like, this is just cooking. Like, truly, what is the worst case scenario of anything? Like, it's all good. And he was so stressed out because he is kind of like me. He wants everything to be perfect. And he's, just like, from wiping the counter to make sure there's nothing on it, like that has bacteria. Like, he is just like... And I said, nothing could really go wrong here. I mean, the house could catch on fire, but that has nothing to do with the meat or the way you're cooking it. But I think in that moment, I thought, truly, what is the worst case scenario of anything that they try that's new? Them venturing out and living alone, going to a college. I think we could speak on that. Like, we should let them kind of be part of the choice for college. I think that's the best thing. That's ideal. Like, we want them all to go where you went to, or your husband went to, or what have you. But really, them finding their identity and where they actually want to go helps with the independence. I know with my kids, that was kind of a big thing. Jacqueline wanted me to choose where she went for safety. But she ultimately, I made her make that decision. And then Riley really chose his school. But in Christian, I'm like, wherever you want to go. I think that's important that what is the worst case scenario? That they pick a bad school and you move them to another school later. I mean, tell us about that.
And I think one of the important pieces of parenting adult children is that, let's say they make a mistake. Well, then it's a perfect opportunity for you to say, okay, so what'd you learn from it? And like, what do you need to do to let me help? Let's pick you back up. Let's go at it again.
Right.
It's an opportunity for us to, quote, really demonstrate confidence in them.
Yes.
Because we're believing in them and who they were created to be. A decision doesn't define them. And I think that's really important for us to keep reminding them, this does not define you. It's a moment in time. That's all it is. So, okay, so what did we learn? Okay, so let's do it again. Let's go in a different direction. This didn't work. That door closed. Now we're going to go in a different one. That says as much to them about them building their confidence, because one of the things we have to pay attention to is how easily it is for us to, quote, undermine their confidence. Because when we constantly are telling them what to do, we're basically saying, I don't believe in you. I don't trust your judgment. And I don't think you can do this.
Right.
That is the death knell of confidence for young adults. And that really creates a lot of shame. It creates a lot of low self-esteem, right? So show me a kid who's accustomed to making mistakes and who learns from them. I'll show you a kid who's becoming confident.
Yes.
But they have to have the practice. We all got here through practice.
Yes.
We didn't get here just all of a sudden waking up one day and having our acts together.
No, still trying to figure it out at 49.
Right. Right there with you.
Yeah.
So it's the question of, how do I keep, reframing it in such a way that says, all right, here's your moment. Let's learn from it. And you're bigger than this.
And don't you think that giving them that moment, giving them that charge, like, you've got this, them knowing that we ultimately have got them at home.
Yes.
I think gives them a lot of confidence. And as we've developed this relationship, I think that's what I get asked most of the time in my DMs is, how do you develop this relationship you have with your kids? It's years of knowing that no matter what they did, whether they thought it was a good decision or a bad decision, that I still love them. I've got them, and no matter what, they can always come to me, and we would problem solve it together, or we would figure it out with Jesus, or, whatever. I mean, there were times they'd wake me up in the middle of the night, and they're like, I've got to tell you something. And it's something that their friends would even say that and they're really good. I'm not saying that they do anything really bad, but their friends are like, I can't believe you tell your mom everything. And they do, because they know I either have a solution because they trust that, or God has a solution even bigger, or that they can come to me if they make a mistake.
Right.
So they can go out there and try, they can fail, and that's okay. But at home or wherever we are, they know we're their constant. And I think that is because we've developed a relationship, not as a boss, but as a leader. Right.
And I think, we've stayed genuine. I think the most important thing is for us to stay real with our kids, right? Because then we're trustworthy, right? If we try to be everything to everybody, then we don't know who we are.
Right.
And one of the best gifts that we give our children is for us to really do our work and being the healthiest version of ourselves.
Gosh, that is so true.
And that way, if they see that we're willing to do the work, we're willing to look in the mirror, we're willing to, hold our own selves accountable to the hard places, then that gives them an example of what normal is.
Yes.
And so I wanted my kids to understand I'm always going to be working with a coach or a counselor or somebody, being in a group where I'm getting better. Because why? I don't ever want to stop growing.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's that mindset. And I think when your Tiffany was home from college in the summer, and one of her friends came by, and we went out to lunch, and he said, Miss Hickem, he said, Tiffany is the only friend that I have who's the same person in front of her mom as she is behind her back.
I love that.
And I said, really? And he said, oh yeah. He says, I'm a completely different person in front of my own parents.
I've heard that from Jacqueline's friends. Yes.
And I said, well, how come? And he says, because I know who they want me to be. And he said, I can't be that person, but when I'm with them, I pretend that I am, but then I'm my real self, like when I'm with you.
Wow.
And he said,
that's sad.
Tiffany is always the same.
The same.
And I really sat with that for a long time. And I was really sad for him, right? Because I was like, every kid wants to know that in their worst moment, they can still be that version of themselves and know that they're deeply loved.
Yes.
And cared for and respected. And so I just think as we do the work, they'll be the recipient of the blessing of that too. Not just us, but they get better too.
Doing the work.
Yeah.
So you and I have another commonality. I want to talk about the single parent because there's a lot of listeners that are single parents.
Right.
And I know that I've transitioned into that now. And I'm really the active parent. I don't know the best way to put it, Catherine. How would you put it? But what, when you're when you're the parent that is, you're trying to be all the things and you really can't be all the things because you can't be another human. Right. You can't be a father when you're a mother. What would you say to someone who's like myself, never dreamed you'd be a single parent? You are, and you're the resource from whether it's financial, sending them to college, getting that Venmo request, or, I need you because of this happened, or I need to talk to you about this, or I'm starting a business. I want to talk. How do you wear all the hats in a graceful way and try to be all the things for them when you really can't? Why don't you speak into this? And I know we both have shared this because we've recently, I'll let you just talk. You know what I'm saying.
I know. I gotcha.
Being delicate here.
You're right. I think, first of all, we stay present in the moment that we're in because we can't do 10 things at once.
Right.
So we stay present for what's the need of the moment. And if the need of the moment is they just need to come in and throw up and tell me all their stuff, then that's where I'll show up. If they need counsel in another direction, then that's where I'll show up. I can't get so focused on all the moving pieces that I get overwhelmed. Right. Because it's overwhelming.
It can be overwhelming.
It can be because it's a lot, right?
Right.
Adult lives have a lot of complications.
Yes, they're complex.
Very much so.
Yes.
So therefore, my goal was to say, where are we? And what do I need to really hear as to what's really, is he really scared? Is she really doubting herself? What's the real need that's in front of me? Mm-hmm. So my goal was always to say, what is it that they're really asking? They're talking about this, but what is the real need behind that? And really try to, quote, laser in on that. And then I'll check it out and say, here's what I'm hearing you say. Are you scared? Are you struggling with that? And they say, yeah, or no, I'm just really disappointed. It's like, okay, let's sit with that. So I would try to narrow it and go from here to like this.
Bring it in.
To bring it in. I also realized there's certain things I couldn't be, by just virtue of being female. There's certain things with my son I'll never fully understand, and being able to say, I can't answer that question because I'm not a male,
right?
But I can tell you from what I know. Here's my perspective, and being able to say what I can and can't do, and be okay with that.
It's interesting. I was doing something. I was trying to be a dad, right? And I was doing it, and I was taking Christian along. I think I was wanted to take him to a gun range, and he's like, "Listen," he's like, "You don't have to try to be a dad right now. You're not going to go to the gun range with me." And I'm like, "No, I actually want to go to the gun range. I'm going to do this." He's like, "No, that's just weird." He's like, "You don't have to be my dad. I just need you to be my mom." And so that was like I said, when your kids speak into you, I was trying to be, I'm like, come on, let's go be rough and rowdy, let's get dirty. And he's like, who are you? You know what I mean?
Right.
And I had to really think about that. Like, yes, I do want to still take him to the gun range or whatever that floats his boat. But, I think for us, we can just be who we are and not necessarily feel like you have to be both, because that's kind of a path that just kind of leads to nowhere. And
it's not doable.
It's not doable.
Right. On top of it, we set ourselves up for failure if we try to do that.
Yes.
So it's like giving ourselves permission to be able to say, I'm not going to be all things, but I'm going to be the best version of me
for them
in this moment for what I have to offer. And because I know them and I love them in a way that no one else will.
Yes.
So they'll be okay with that.
And truly, I would think about, all these very experience driven, right? I'm always like, let's have fun. But I would think sometimes they just want to sit with me and they just want to talk. And they don't need all the frills. They don't need to do all the things. If I'm like, hey, let's go karting or whatever, they're just like, who are you?
Right.
They just want to sit and talk. And sometimes it's knowing them. And sometimes I know it's at the end of the day, late at night, pop in the room and we're going to talk, or,
Oh, yeah.
hey, make sure we have family dinner just so we all connect. Maybe it's once a week. It's not as much as it used to be, but it's what we can get. And it's just looking them in the eyes and having a little FaceTime. It's a longer phone call on the phone with Jacqueline where I'm not rushed. And I'm just like, hey, I like to call her when I'm in the car and I'm undistracted,
Right.
and I'm like, you got me for, as long as you need, but I'm going to be in the car for an hour. Let's talk. So yeah, it's trying to just be someone that's there. It doesn't necessarily have to be like on a go-kart or on a dirt bike, slinging mud, which I've done.
Right.
And we almost died. So that was not a good idea.
Yeah. Glad you changed your options
Yes.
on that. My son has lived overseas for the last 14 years. And so it's always by Zoom or it's just by listening. That's how we've had to communicate.
Yes.
But over the years, I would get a call and it would just be this abstract question, but it was important to him.
Yes.
And it was a question I had to immediately go, there's a reason he's asking. I may not always know what all the reasons are.
Yes. Or the answer, really.
Or the answer, but I need to be present and I really need to take this seriously.
Yes.
Right. And go with it, and sometimes it might come back around where I actually will know the full context of it. And sometimes I don't.
Right.
But I think it's the idea of being there, being present, taking them seriously. And like I said, just being the best authentic version. And if I don't know, I'd say, son, I don't know. That's a really great question.
My kids appreciate when I do
Yes.
that because they're like, yeah, she doesn't know. And that's normal. That's kind of cool that you don't always have the answers. I mean, they look forward to hearing what my thoughts are, which I think is such a gift. But sometimes I do say like, I don't know. Let me Google that. Or let me get back to you. Or let me call Catherine. But yes, I am very, I think being transparent with your kids and real with them as well as we are in our natural environments, at work or whatever, they appreciate it just as much as say, I don't have all the answers.
Right.
They do know who does. And I always redirect them that Jesus does. And I remind them that they could pray just like I can, and they could just talk out loud and talk to him like a friend. And I just remind them that he's there for them every single moment.
Right.
And he has all the answers, and he'll show up if you're quiet and still and you listen and you're looking for him, you'll hear him. And so I hope that I can redirect them there instead of Google. But yes.
And sometimes like I would get a text and say, hey mom, can you pray for me? I'm going into a really hard test, or something would happen. And so at the end of the day, I would pick up the phone and say, hey, why don't I just pray for you right now? And I just pray for them.
Yes.
And it would be like a minute, but it would be, I wanted them to hear my voice. I wanted to say, I can love you.
It's calming. It's
calming. But what's really sweet is that now sometimes I get we'll be calling and we'll talk about something. And Tiff will say, hey, mom, why don't I just pray for you?
I love that.
And so
they're praying for you now.
It's like it's
comes
reciprocal.
back.
It comes back.
It's an investment that you have a return on.
Yeah. I'm a big believer. The more we put in, the higher the return.
That's the nugget of the day.
Yeah.
The more you put in, the higher the return. You're tired. You're weary. You're like, I haven't showered in 3 days. I don't get to the gym. It's worth it. It is worth it. It's, I'm eating, chicken nuggets most of the time, and but it's worth it. And then when you get to the teen years and it's stressful and there's bigger issues, there's depression, there's anxiety, there's so much that happens in these years. Just continue to keep on keeping on. Do not lose heart. Do not give up. Keep loving them. Keep loving them. Keep loving them. Keep showing up. Keep being intentional and persistent and being their best friend. And I just want to say, to wrap this up, I believe, and maybe you disagree, I think we believe the same. I've heard people, you can't be your kid's friend. I totally disagree with that. I feel like they need friendship, but they also need parenting. So I've tried to do the 50-50 approach that I've just kind of made up, but I want them to know that they've got a friend in me.
Can I reframe just one?
Please do.
One little piece?
Yes.
I think there's a season of time where we aren't friends. And I think there's a season that it shifts to where we can be friends. I think there's this piece in the middle where we become a resource for them. Because it's like, I want them to always know that I'm friendly.
Yes.
Right. And I want to, quote, spend time with them. But I think it's just depends on the age. I think the age has something to do with it. I think when they get to college, at this point, we are in transition of that whole understanding of I'm always here for you and I love being with you. And to them, it feels like a friendship.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You and I still know we're still going to be moms.
Yes.
But to them, that they can come talk to us like a friend.
Yes.
That's what you're really saying.
Yes. And through this investment, that's what your return is.
That's exactly right.
I think that's a good place to wrap up. Catherine Hickem, my dear friend. I think she'll be your friend. I hope you found some nuggets here to hold on to. One nugget as we depart, Catherine, one nugget that we wrap this up. Out of everything they've heard, because there's a lot of good about faith, about loving them, about knowing them, about building into their faith, what would be the one nugget that you would tell a mom in the middle of, let's say, she's struggling right now. It's just momming is hard.
This is going to sound a little odd, but
we are okay with that.
So what I'm going to say is the more we know who we are and who we were created to be,
yes,
then we can give authentically to our children, who we can then help them become the very best version of who they were created to be. So therefore, if I'm not trying to please the world, but I'm really being the very best of me,
yes,
I have really given them a foundation of faith and confidence.
I love that. That's perfect. That's true. I love that.